Chapter 5. The Gull, Bill said, indicating a black-hulled sloop moored at the pier nearest to the breakwater. Claire struggled to pick out her single mast amid so many others bobbing in the harbour. Only one private cabin, and that's spoken for, I'm afraid, but I'm sure you'll get on well with the rest of the crew. Claire took in the crowds of people lining the docks. She was hard put to imagine sharing quarters with any of these roughly dressed men. "Something smells worse than wet cat," Echo complained from the fastness of Claire's improvised pack. "You should try it out in the open air," Claire replied. "I hope there are at least separate toilet facilities," she murmured softly. Despite the cries and creaks coming from the loading and unloading ships, Bill heard her. "Of course there are," he assured her, beaming. "I'll tell the lads they can have port, and you'll have starboard." Claire did not share his enthusiasm or his sense of humour. Apparently there were some things that even orphans learned to take for granted. "How many lads are there?" Claire asked, wrenching her mind from the inevitable. "Just the 4. It's all we need for a boat this size. Once we're clear of these waters, I know where I can find men of the right sort." "Can we trust the ones you have now?" Claire asked. "Well enough. I didn't turn up a navigator. That's where you come in. But you'd be amazed how many true mariners can be found even in these backwaters. Jason was a member of the Brotherhood some 20 years ago. He settled down for his wife's sake, but she's dead now. Wouldn't mention that if I were you. He's still cut up. John, his youngest, told me about it. Of course, Jack says he's been more occupied this last year trying to keep his 2 sons from getting themselves killed avenging her." Bill went quiet as he led her calmly through the throngs of merchants and sailors along the pier. "You, sir! Silks from Sicilia!" a stallholder cried to a richly dressed man whose retainers were already straining under the weight of the morning's parcels. A few feet away, people were packed tightly around a stage where an eager slaver extolled the virtues of his oversized Norse captives. He was careful not to mention that for all their strength, their skin was already blistering from the touch of the Armorican sun. Some poor unfortunate would no doubt be fool enough to buy a servant who would either kill him or die of heat. Through all the chaos of the piers and wharves, 2 more souls walked unnoticed and unmarked, in silence. Eventually, unable to contain herself, Claire asked, "Who killed their mother?" "Duke's soldiers, of course," Bill said when he was sure the press of people around them had thinned enough. "Jackson finally cracked over one tax or another. I'm surprised he lasted as long as he did. Most of us would never have stood it for so long. As luck would have it, he lived, but his wife got caught in the crossfire. Most times they would have hanged him. I guess they believed that killing his wife along with taking both his boats and his warehouse was punishment enough." "That's terrible." "Could have been much worse. Either way, they left him and his 2 boys looking for a new start. They've all got some experience, admittedly mostly coast-hugging as traders, but good enough with me to watch over them. Not been in many scraps at sea, but Nathaniel, his eldest, has been practicing in pubs recently from what I can gather." "Who's the 4th man?" Claire inquired. Bill looked around, staring into the fetid shadows that gripped the alleys between the warehouses, even going so far as to sniff in the stagnant air. Claire had never liked the smell of the docks, even from a distance. On the few occasions when she had come into town, she had always stayed well clear. "What am I getting myself into?" "What was that?" Bill asked, striding towards the boat, apparently unaware of her discomfort. "I said, who's the last crew member?" "Fellow name of Rhett Hoskins. Fancies himself first mate, and if I'm not careful, he'll fancy himself captain." Bill laughed, springing up the gangplank. "Why are we taking him with us, then?" A red-headed giant who would not have looked out of place among the brutes on the slave block shouted back, "Because I'm all he could get on short notice." "If you say so, who am I to argue?" Bill said, smiling. "I don't see why you should go thinking yourself captain anyway. We're in the same straits. In fact, I even got here first," the big man pointed out. "And what did you do with your time, brother, apart from drinking the taverns dry?" "Not all of us had pearls to barter, Captain. Thus I am the better man to command, as the articles will tell you." "You have me there, which is why you have me here," the first mate boomed, and more softly, "Is this our navigator? Are we ready to go?" Bill gave one more look around before nodding. "Take her below and keep her out of sight. We'll sail on the next tide." "Aye. That's I captain to you." "Go with Rhett, Claire, and let me know if he gives you any trouble." "Why do I have to stay out of sight?" "Even if they were not already looking for us, a woman aboard might well give the wrong signals. It's unusual for a craft of this size to have a navigator, even a young one. Best to avoid anyone making educated guesses." Okay, Claire agreed. She scurried up the plank and disappeared into the narrow hatchway. I hope she isn't as inexperienced as she looks, Rhett muttered, watching her go. She's been trained, Bill answered defensively. Let's hope so. It was a miscalculation by the navigator that brought me here and cost 50 men their lives. Do we have a choice? Bill asked. Go below and show her a hammock. Free at last, the gecko thrilled, scurrying up the walls and into a shadowy corner. I can smell rats. Not too many, Claire warned. You'll regret it if you get seasick. Wait till you're sure of your sea legs. I do have 4 of them, the gecko answered indignantly. If only half of them are seaworthy, that's as good as anyone here. You'll be captain next, Claire said, smiling for the first time since her escape. I would never stoop to such a position, Echo answered haughtily. I'm a passenger, first class by preference. How many first-class passengers eat rats? It takes a refined palate to appreciate a good rat. Claire recoiled in disgust at the second-hand experience of rat-eating that Echo broadcast. Yuck, says you. Who else around here knows what it's like? Well, I do now, thanks to you. Are you all right there, miss? Red asked, mercifully distracting her from the alien sensation of slowly swallowing a hairy body head first. Just that you seem to be talking to yourself. No, I was talking to... She started to point, but Echo was nowhere to be seen. You can call me Claire, by the way. Much obliged, Claire. Bill asked me to set you up with somewhere to sleep, Rhett said. Claire studied the man with newly discovered caution. Try as she might, she couldn't help smiling back at him. That's why Bill took him on, she realized. For all his rudeness, there was no wickedness in him. Funny, she would never have thought of wickedness or evil until today. Until she had looked into those hungry yellow eyes. She shuddered involuntarily at the memory. Something wrong, Claire? Red asked, his concern encouraging her growing trust. No, nothing that won't get better. Claire hoped she sounded more confident than she felt. So you want to find that bunk? Accepting that she was free of any immediate danger, the last of her reserves crumbled. Yes, that sounds like a good idea, Claire said as exhaustion washed over her. Guessed it might be. You look done in, the man said, placing a guiding hand on her shoulders and steering her towards the bow. They passed through the crew quarters, which seemed to Claire little more than a corridor with a single door at the far end. Hammocks were slung one above the other on either wall, stretched between the hull's thick ribs. A long, well-used table and 2 equally long benches were bolted in the middle, leaving enough room for a man to walk on either side, but not much more. Brass lanterns swayed slightly to the harbour's gentle swell, but they were unlit, and the only light streamed in from small portholes set high in the side of the hull. Claire's throat tightened as she tried to pierce the shadows cast by those narrow beams. Don't worry. You'll not have to sleep here, lass, Rhett assured her, mistaking her tension for distaste. There's another bunk near the bow. Red opened the door at the far end of the sleeping quarters and led her into a large room packed with casks and crates. I don't know where you two plan on taking us, he said, looking at the still open hatch above them, but he's packing enough provisions. I don't know where he wants to go yet, Claire answered honestly. I know the type. He likes to play things close to his chest, Rhett laughed. Guess that's why he gets to be captain. I guess. Sorry, lass, we'll talk later. I'll get you to bed before you fall asleep on your feet. Without waiting for her to reply, Rhett strode to the end of the storeroom and opened the door on a small galley. Claire followed with leaden feet. This is it, lass. Should be the cook's bunk. Rhett indicated the single hammock strung between the narrow timbers of the bow. But since that's me, and I'm thinking you'll be wanting privacy more than I will, it's all yours. Under any other circumstances, Claire might have turned up her nose at the tiny cubicle adjoining the kitchen. The smells of old cooking would have seemed overpowering and the lack of light oppressive. But now it was a relief after the stench of the dock, and the darkness invited her to sleep as she realized she had not done in days. She took the hammock gratefully without complaint, and slept like a stone. It took a day before she realized that she had made a mistake. The smell of onions overwhelmed her, dragging her from sleep with their sharp sweetness. Her stomach lurched, moving in time with the rocking hammock. She tried to rise, but fell back onto the musty pillow. Her guts heaved. Desperate, she tipped herself out of the hammock onto the floor. Oh, so you're awake, Rhett called from the galley. Come and get some breakfast. She hurried past him without even looking up. Beyond the hastily opened storeroom door sat a man with salt and pepper hair and a scar running the length of his face. Morning, lass. Jackson Holt started to speak, but the colour of the girl's face stopped him. "This way," he said, rising and helping her to the first rungs of the ladder. She climbed shakily and launched herself across the deck to hang like a rag doll over the rail. Her stomach heaved. In quiet stages her body adjusted to the motion of the boat. Her sickness retreated into a vague nausea, blowing away in the cool breeze. "I don't suppose this is the right time to point out you should be doing that over the starboard bow," Bill joked from above her. Setting both hands on the rails, she looked up to see Bill standing behind the ship's wheel. Further forward, two youths were busying themselves, trimming the sails and tying down ropes. Looking up, she saw the Gull's white canvas sails straining, majestic against the blue of the cloudless sky. The cries of seabirds told her they must be relatively close to land. "I should never have eaten that rat." A plaintive whine emanated from one of the canvas-covered bundles on the deck. "It was diseased." "Echo, where are you?" Claire replied weakly. "In hell." "Not in hell," Bill answered cheerfully. "But I'll be obliged if you come out of that cannon." "Why? It's the only place not swirling around." "It's also dangerous." "Out there is dangerous. I don't know why you even need it." "Admittedly, there are only 8 on board," Bill said, deliberately misunderstanding. "But I'm a pirate. I like them. They make me feel comfortable. The last thing I need, if push comes to shove, is to lose my enemy's respect by firing lizard juice at them." "You may not have a choice," Echo moaned, producing a wrenching noise from under the tightly bound canvas. "That's it, out!" Bill shouted, tying up the wheel. He advanced on the canvas bundle with a belaying pin in hand. "Unless you want to find out what it's like to be the clapper in a bell, out!" "This is how you treat your passengers." "It's how we treat freeloaders," Bill said, giving the brass barrel an experimental tap. I'm going," Echo blurted as he scurried out onto the deck and down the hatch towards the crew quarters. "Try looking at the horizon." Bill lowered his pin and came over to stand beside Claire. Claire opened her mouth to reply and then decided against it. Instead, she took Bill's advice and stared at the gently shifting line of the horizon. Bill's trick and the soothing touch of the clean breeze whistling over the rigging next to her quelled the storm in her innards. "How long do you expect me to live like this?" she asked. "Don't worry, you get used to it. It's been your people's birthright for years beyond human measure." "Not my people. America has as many farmers as sailors. My family must have been farmers." "No, they were not, as I already told your brother," Bill said, his tone turning serious. "How would you know? No one knew our parents. We were foundlings." "I have already heard this from your brother, but I will try to explain things better than I managed with him. He could not believe. He had too much to lose, and he hadn't seen what you have seen. Though he was warned, for all the good it did." "Where is Adrian now? Where have they taken him? And what will happen to him?" Claire demanded, forgetting her discomfort completely in her concern for her missing brother. "Alas, the answer to all these questions is the same," Bill replied. "Don't answer me with riddles. Where is he?" "My riddles are 8,000 years of history," the buccaneer snapped back at her. "Your history as much as mine, though you don't know it." "I don't care about it. I only want to know one thing. Is he alive? Or did one of those things get him?" "No monster shall devour his soul, but it will be devoured nonetheless," the pirate added sadly to himself. "Wait, let me finish. I do not mean to confuse you, but there is much for you to learn before you can understand this. They have taken him to Negra." "Where is that? And how long will it take us to sail there?" Bill shook his head. "No ship has ever touched keel to that rock. Not even Negra's own navigators can find a way through the whirlpool that forever swirls around the island." "Then how can we save him?" "We cannot." "You promised," Claire cried out. "You said—" "That I would do what I could, and at the moment I can do nothing." "I shan't find your gate for you unless—" "Claire," Bill interrupted, looming over her. "If you choose not to be my navigator once we are in waters more commonly used by the Brotherhood, I shall reluctantly put you ashore at the first harbour. At the moment, however, more than just the lives on this boat hang on you finding that gate. You must understand, Claire." Bill put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I do not take your brother's loss lightly, but I tried to warn him and could do no more. If you come with me, I can offer you a hope, however small, that we might one day wrest him from the witches of the Dark Isle. Such a thing has only been done once, but it might be done again. If we can gain the treasure I am seeking, then it's all the more likely." "What treasure?" Claire said, interested despite herself. "That I will not tell you until I know you're my navigator. Instead, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why all compasses point north? Adrian once told me it was because of magnetism. Oh, it's a force, sure enough, and many people give it different names. The truth is that all compass needles are drawn to the power swirling around Negra. Why do you keep trying to tell me this? Because if you are to be my navigator, you must know the true shape of the world. A sphere? And flat? And there are places that defy shape altogether. There's no ends to the map. What you must know is that there is a centre, the inner sea, and Negra is at the centre of that, a dark rock of solid iron, surrounded by 3 great continents, and the remains of a 4th. The remains of a continent? What happened to it? It sunk. Like Atlantis. Bill tensed. That was once its name, before the ocean was fractured. How can an ocean be fractured? With sorcery, of course. Once there was only one world. That was before Lilith. Who was that? Claire was becoming more than a little tired of having to constantly plead for crumbs of information instead of proper answers, but it was clear that Rhett had been right. Bill was a man who liked to keep things close to his chest. Something told her that he'd been doing it for so long he didn't realize how infuriating he was being. Claire waited patiently, and at last the captain formulated an answer. In times long past, Lilith was the high priestess of Atlantis. Now she sits at the heart of Negra's empire. It was she who sunk her own land when she was opposed and now acts as advisor to the nations of the Axis. When she finally built her tower on the Black Isles, she used her power to bend the world into a new shape. She made the gate. Indeed she did, and she trapped the people of the world behind them, cut off from each other and helpless against her. Since the sundering, only a navigator can find a gate and pass its guardians. There are few outside Negra's service who would even make the attempt. None of as much account as the Brotherhood, Bill added with a note of pride. You keep mentioning this Brotherhood of yours, Claire said. Of ours, Bill replied, glancing around the deck. Claire didn't bother to point out that she was hardly anyone's brother. Better to let him explain it his way than ask the wrong questions. Those few ships that survived the destruction of Atlantis and their seers banded together to form what became the Brotherhood. Bill's shoulders slumped slightly. But we, and those few nations bold enough to succour us, are little more than an irritation to Lilith and her witches. Claire nodded. Adrian had once told her if you wanted someone to talk, it was best to give them silence to fill. Over time, Bill continued, his eyes fixed on the horizon, those lost behind the gates forgot that there have ever been worlds beyond. When the new worlds were formed, some energies were trapped and others excluded. I have visited worlds where seers or mentalists might be considered wonders, but alchemists achieve miracles, or where physical principles are in so much flux that even the most basic tools will not function, and reality must be reshaped by force of will. In many places the old magic became legend, and many worlds died, for where all the energy is spent there is no life. Those worlds have not simply faded. Lilith drains off power until they too are exhausted. Why would anyone do such a thing? Claire asked. 2 reasons. She has always wanted dominion, and the oldest reason of all, she didn't want to die. She's already lived more than 8,000 years, Bill added. Claire could hardly believe such a claim. The tension in Bill's face convinced her he believed what he was saying, and that it was a source of real sadness. But surely he had to be wrong. All of this sounds completely impossible, she blurted. How can you expect me to believe any of it? Living 8,000 years is not an impossible feat, Bill said mildly. It would not even require the massive amount of energy Lilith drew from the world. The truly remarkable fact is that for those 8,000 years, she has had a knife in her heart. What? He scowled at her. I'm sorry, Bill, but this is just a lot to take in. How could anyone live for thousands of years with a knife in their heart? The buccaneer let out a slow breath. When Lilith built her tower, she broke the dominion of the first gods on the world. She had many supporters in this. It would be fair to say that the current state of affairs is only slightly worse than what came before. When one of her allies, Ashendar, saw that she meant to replace the tyrannical rule of the priestesses and their mysteries with her own, he betrayed her. So this Ashendar stabbed her? Indeed, but fast as he was, he had not reckoned with the extent of her power. Rather than surrender to death, she broke the world, shattering existence into fragments, and trapping them all in that single second. Since then she has held back death by holding back time. Our one hope lies in the fact that she is frozen, sealed away from us by the necessity to hold herself from the moment of death. She must rely on those they take to Negra becoming her hands and eyes in the world. Then Adrian... Claire choked on the words. Her head was already spinning from everything Bill had told her. Yes, he is talented as you are, so the witches will make him theirs. We cannot stop it, child. All the witches are linked to their fell queen. Only as she is destroyed can we hope to reclaim your brother. There was a long moment of stillness. Water lapped beneath them and birds let out muted cries. The creak of the rigging above them seemed ominous groans to Claire's ear. She was aware she hadn't properly grasped everything Bill had told her, but then she didn't need to. All that mattered was this Lilith was taking Adrian from her. The knot in her gut started to unravel, replaced by a burning anger. "And you will swear to help me do this?" she said at last, gaze fixed on a point beyond the skyline. "If you will swear the same to me," Bill replied. "And we will get Adrian back?" "There's a chance," he answered at last. "His bond with Echo is something they would never have allowed had they known. Perhaps there will be enough of him in Echo to return him to himself." "They'll take his mind?" "No, he just won't be able to hold on to it," Bill said somberly, staring out into the emptiness of sea and sky. How could he tell her that on Negra the only thing they actually took from you was your eyes?